I am Dr. Kay Fontana, life force coach and grief recovery specialist, and I am deeply familiar with the pain of loss, having experienced many throughout my life. At just 9 years old, I lost my brother to cancer and witnessed my parents' immense grief, which was unbearable. Years later, my mother lost her battle with Alzheimer's, and then my father was diagnosed with cancer and passed away a week after his diagnosis. Most recently, in January 2023, I experienced the devastating loss of my husband and soulmate of 40 years due to multiple health issues. In between were countless other losses, including family members, friends, co-workers, beloved pets, and even finances. However, I turned my pain into my purpose and passion to share strategies to help you get through your darkest days and navigate the complexities of grief. This is the Healing Our Grieving Hearts podcast. Welcome to today's episode where I'm going to talk about when grief is absent. Absent grief often manifests through an absence of traditional grieving signs, making it challenging for outsiders to recognize that someone is actually grieving. While many people associate grief with visible expressions of sadness, such as crying or withdrawal, those experiencing absent grief may not exhibit these behaviors. Instead, their grieving may be more subtle, occurring internally without outward expression. This does not mean the individual is not hurting, rather, they may feel compelled to process their emotions privately. This lack of visible grieving can lead to misunderstandings where friends and family might assume the individual has moved on or isn't affected. Consequently, this can create a feedback loop of isolation as the grieving person may feel the need to hide their feelings even further. Social norms around grieving often suggest that showing emotions is essential for healing. But for those with absent grief, the internal struggle becomes invisible, leading to feelings of frustration and loneliness as they navigate their grief in the silence of their own experience. Social isolation can be a profound aspect of absent grief. When an individual's experience of loss is not acknowledged or understood by those around them, they may feel increasingly distant from their social circles. This sense of isolation can stem from the lack of social validation for their grief. For instance, if one loses a pet or undergoes a significant life change perceived as less significant than traditional losses like the death of a family member, they may feel that others minimize their pain. Friends and family may inadvertently avoid discussing the loss, leading the grieving individual to feel unsupported and alone in their experience. This isolation can be compounded by an individual's reluctance to share their feelings, fearing judgment or an inappropriate response. Over time, the absence of empathetic support can exacerbate feelings of loneliness, setting the stage for more profound emotional struggles. People who experience this isolation might feel they can't turn to anyone for support, which can delay healing, resulting in anxiety and depression. Unacknowledged loss is a key component of absent grief, referring to losses that society often fails to recognize as legitimate. Different cultures and communities have various norms regarding what constitutes a real loss, and those who don't fit these norms might find their grief invalidated. For example, losing a close friend that may not attract the same level of sympathy as losing a family member, even though the emotional impacts can be just as profound. Furthermore, People dealing with grief from non-traditional relationships like friends, mentors, or even pets might find themselves struggling to articulate their feelings. Society often has established ideas about acceptable grief responses tied to recognized relationships, leaving many bereaved individuals feeling as though their pain is less significant or worthy of acknowledgement. This lack of validation can lead to internalized feelings of inadequacy, further complicating the individual's emotional journey. The absence of recognition means that conversations about their grief may not occur, and individuals may end up processing their feelings in isolation, unable to find a support for their experiences. Guilt and shame frequently accompany absent grief, creating an internal conflict of emotions. Individuals experience this kind of grief may find themselves questioning the legitimacy of their feelings. They might feel guilty for grieving a loss that society deems trivial or unworthy, such as losing a pet or a friendship. This guilt is often compounded by outside pressures that suggest who is entitled to grieve and how they should do so. The individual may fear judgment or believe that others will see them as overreacting to what they perceived as a lesser loss. As a result, they may feel ashamed to express their grief openly, leading to further repression of their emotions. Over time, this guilt can cause significant emotional distress, preventing the individual from finding closure. They may struggle with feelings of shame, worrying that they should simply get over it instead of honoring their grief. This internal conflict can perpetuate the cycle of disconnectedness and isolation, preventing meaningful connections with others who could provide comfort and understanding. I recently faced the heartbreaking loss of my beloved dog Yoda. I had mentioned him in a previous podcast titled, When We Lose Our Pets, Our Companions, months before he passed away. Following my husband's death last year, I made sure to treasure every moment with Yoda, as he too felt the absence and struggled with separation anxiety when I wasn't home. Losing Yoda was incredibly devastating for me, especially since my husband and I had adopted him when he was just a puppy. After his passing, I became very selective about who I confided in regarding my feelings. I realized that those who had never owned a pet might not fully understand the depth of my grief. I encountered individuals in my life who might have trivialized my loss by saying, he was just a dog. To guard myself against the pain of such dismissive comments, I chose to avoid those conversations altogether, as it served as a protective mechanism to prevent myself from suppressing my true emotions. Experiencing conflicted emotions is a hallmark of absent grief, as individuals might find themselves torn between contrasting feelings regarding their loss. This internal conflict can arise from the complexity of the relationships involved or the circumstances surrounding the loss. For instance, someone mourning the death of a close friend who had been suffering from a debilitating illness might experience simultaneous feelings of sadness for the loss and relief that their friend is no longer in pain. This duality can create a significant emotional confusion, leading the individual to wonder if they are allowed to feel relief or if it signifies a lack of love or loyalty to the deceased. The societal stigma surrounding mixed emotions can further complicate the grieving process, as individuals might fear judgment for feeling anything other than deep sorrow. This can result in feelings of guilt as they question the appropriateness of their emotions. Additionally, this internal struggle can lead to long-term psychological consequences, complicating the healing process. Individuals struggling with these conflicted emotions need a space where they can express and explore their feelings without fear of judgment, allowing for a more comprehensive understanding of their grief journey. Following my husband's passing, I found myself struggling with conflicting emotions regarding his death. For the past 6 or 7 years of his life, he endured significant suffering, which made me feel a sense of relief knowing he was finally free from that pain. While I felt grateful that his struggles had come to an end, this relief did not lessen the profound sadness that I've experienced since that day. The complexity of these emotions left me feeling torn. I wanted to celebrate his freedom from suffering, yet I was deeply heartbroken over the void left in my life without him. This mix of feelings became a reminder of those complexities of love, loss, and the human experience. Finding closure can be profoundly challenging for individuals experiencing absent grief, primarily because their loss is often unacknowledged by society. The conventional markers of closure, such as a funeral, support from family and friends, or shared rituals, may be absent or feel inappropriate. Without these communal acknowledgement gestures, individuals can feel lost in their emotions, making it difficult to process their grief fully. Consequently, unresolved feelings may linger, leading to a prolonged grieving period characterized by confusion and frustration. This difficulty in attaining closure can manifest as persistent rumination over the loss, ongoing sadness, or a sense of incompleteness. Individuals may struggle with questions like, did I do enough? Or was our relationship meaningful? These unanswered thoughts can haunt them, making it hard to move forward. Furthermore, the lack of external validation and support can leave them feeling isolated and misunderstood, compounding their struggle to find peace. Acknowledging that their grief is valid and worthy of exploration is crucial for healing. Support groups, counseling, or open conversations with empathetic friends can offer help in which individuals can externalize their experiences and allow for emotional resolution and a sense of closure. Individuals experience absent grief often develop non-traditional grieving practices as an alternative to conventional rituals that may not apply or feel appropriate for their specific loss. Traditional grieving methods such as funerals and memorial services may not resonate when the loss stems from a unique or lesser recognized relationship, such as a pet or a close friendship. In response, these individuals might create their own rituals that hold personal significance. For example, they may dedicate a specific day to reflect on memories, create an art piece that encapsulates their feelings, or establish a personal tradition that honors the lost relationship. These non-traditional mourning practices allow individuals to process their grief in a way that feels authentic and meaningful. Such practices can provide a sense of control over their grieving journey, enabling them to carve out a space for remembrance that aligns with their emotional reality. Additionally, these rituals can serve as an outlet for expression, helping them externalize feelings that may not fit into societal norms. By engaging in these creative forms of grieving, individuals can find comfort and connection to their loss, allowing for individualized healing that acknowledges and honors their unique experience of grief. Now, another type of grief I want to discuss today is delayed grief. Now, delayed grief is a complex phenomenon characterized by the postponement of emotional responses to a loss, causing feelings of sadness and mourning to surface long after the initial event. This form of grief often emerges when individuals have not fully processed their emotions right away, leading to unexpected bursts of grief that can catch them off guard. The onset of delayed grief can be attributed to various factors, including personal circumstances, cultural norms, and the nature of the relationship to the deceased. One of the fundamental characteristics of delayed grief is initial suppression of emotional responses. Many individuals do not allow themselves to grieve immediately following a loss for various reasons. The expectations of others might suggest that one remains strong for others or maintains composure in the face of tragedy. In some cases, people feel pressured to fulfill immediate responsibilities connected to the loss, such as arranging a funeral or managing affairs or comforting others, which can leave little room for personal grief. Additionally, some individuals might experience shock, disbelief, or even a numbing effect, making it challenging for them to connect emotionally with their loss right away. This initial suppression can create a facade of strength and coping, yet it may ultimately hinder the individual's ability to process their grief adequately. After an initial period of suppression, emotions may resurface more intensely at a later time. Delayed grief can manifest during significant events like anniversaries, holidays, or special gatherings. For example, during a family gathering several months after a loved one's death, a person may suddenly feel overwhelming sadness upon noticing the absence of the deceased family member. These moments serve as reminders of the loss, often triggering a flood of emotions that have been bottled up, leading individuals to struggle with their feelings they thought that they had managed to control. This resurfacing can be surprising and at times debilitating, as the individual may find themselves unprepared to confront the grief that had previously been set aside. Those experiencing delayed grief often struggle with confusion and frustration regarding their emotional response. They might question why they are feeling intense pain and sorrow long after the loss, leading to self-doubt and uncertainty about their grief. This confusion is compounded by the attitudes of others that encourage individuals to move on or get over it within a certain time frame. Consequently, individuals may feel guilty for grieving now when they did not seem to do so earlier. This internal conflict can create a frustrating and isolating experience, making them feel as though they were not grieving correctly. As a result, individuals may hesitate to share their feelings with others, fearing judgment or misunderstanding. Consider a scenario in which an individual loses a close family member. In the aftermath of the death, they might focus on fulfilling necessary duties, such as making funeral arrangements and supporting other family members, pushing their own emotions down in the process. Several months later, during a family reunion, they may be struck by the absence of the loved one, perhaps seeing an empty chair or hearing a story that evokes memories of the deceased. Suddenly, they might find themselves overwhelmed with grief, tears falling as they recognize the depth of their loss. This moment illustrates delayed grief, where emotions that were previously suppressed come rushing back with intensity. Delayed grief encapsulates the complex nature of human emotional response to loss, illustrating how grief can manifest long after the initial event. Understanding delayed grief is crucial for both individuals seeking to navigate their feelings and those who support them. By recognizing the nuances of delayed grief, we can foster a compassionate environment that allows for the validation of emotions at any point in the grieving process, thereby facilitating healing and acceptance over time. Regardless of whether you are struggling with absent or delayed grief or any other form of grief, the significance of sharing your feelings cannot be overstated. The emotional journey that accompanies loss is often complex and challenging, making it crucial to connect with compassionate individuals who can empathize with your experiences. These supportive listeners can provide a safe space for you to express your feelings without fear of judgment. Engaging in open conversations with understanding friends, family members, and support groups can be instrumental in helping you navigate your grief. Sharing your emotions helps healing and validation, reminding you that you are not alone on this journey. The mission of Healing Our Grieving Hearts is to help individuals navigate through loss and find purpose through grief recovery, energy healing, and spiritual support. For more information on how to benefit from grief healing modalities that I offer, go to my website at www.healingourgrievinghearts.com, where you can schedule a complimentary grief breakthrough session. You will also find 2 guided meditations on the media page. To follow me on Facebook, go to facebook.com/k.fontana. Thank you for listening to this episode of Healing Our Grieving Hearts podcast. Remember, you are not alone in your grief, and your experiences and emotions are valid. Join me next Saturday at 10 a.m. Arizona time as we continue to explore the human experience and when we grieve people we've never met. Until then, be kind to yourself.